am doing the next chapter of the book, chapter 13, and we'll see how far I get. I'm doing Daring to Hope, Finding God's Goodness in the Broken and the Beautiful by Katie Davis Majors. Thanks so much for joining me. Chapter 13, Faithful. Just one little bird. She's up with the stillness of 5:30 nudges me awake, and I struggle to peel back heavy eyelids. She's up and she sings. I wonder how she can even tell that it's almost morning. I wonder why she sings. I walk quietly to the coffee pot and flick on just enough lights to read by so as to not wake my children. Her song is shrill and bold. This is my quiet time, and I briefly just wish that one little bird would be quiet. It's not light yet. Shh, it's not light yet. I lift my eyes from the worn pages of Isaiah, and my gaze falls on Sarah's notebook, left haphazardly on the table after yesterday's writing assignment. She had written about our time with Betty and said that I had courage. I cried when I first read it. Her words about me too gracious, and I wondered what courage really is. She wrote that I was brave, but as I sit there in the dark, I think I am not. I miss my friends who have gone home to be with Jesus. I know where they are, and that is better by far than suffering and sickness. But still, I miss Betty's smile as I wiped her forehead and the way her weak hand felt in mine, her fingernails hot pink from Margaret's tender care. I miss the still, quiet hours by her bedside and the way her eyes understood, even if her ears did not. I miss Catherine's laugh, loud and infectious. When I see her children smile, I see her, and I still wish the ending had been different. Then I see Sarah's words on the paper again. Our sick friend lived with us for a long time, and my mom was brave and took care of her. I saw her praying for her, and I know that she was loved and cared for. My mom kept her, and she had courage. I did not feel courageous. Sometimes I felt downright defeated. Though we had peacefully said goodbye to Betty and felt certain relief about where she was now, I still had moments when grief blindsided me and threatened to take my breath away. During the last months of Betty's life, my daughter Sumi had made me a paper bag that read, "You can do it." Her thoughtfulness and simple words made me smile. I hung it above the counter where I kept track of Betty's food and drink intake every day. Now, as I passed it, I blinked back tears. The temptation was ever present to think that we didn't do it, that death meant we had failed. But by my loving father whispered a different story. We did it, he said in that soft father way, as if it was our secret, as if he could see all the parts of my heart that the world couldn't see, all the questions, all the reservations. He heard all my unspoken questions about how things might have unfolded if we had done something different. Met her sooner, seen a different doctor, anything. And he assured me that things were always as he intended. We did it. She is home. She is whole. And we had walked her there, straight into his arms. We had not let go of her hand, and he had not let go of ours. I asked him, why, again and again? What could all this suffering possibly accomplish? Why would he allow our family to walk through death like this repeatedly? Why would he allow us to love people so deeply? A dear friend suggested, maybe because he knew you would. Could that be God's answer to us as we walk the hard road? I knew you would do it. I knew you would love them. And suddenly the hard road becomes not a burden, but a place of great honor, a place of partnership and intimacy with him. We didn't have to love Betty. We got to love Betty. We were allowed by our gracious and merciful Father to see these people, to give ourselves to something so grand as ushering his beautiful children back into his arms as heaven at heaven's gate. Then I think that maybe courage is not at all about the absence of fear, but about obedience, even when we are afraid. Maybe courage is trusting when we don't know what is next, leaning into the hard and knowing that it will be hard, but more, God will be near. He is the God who will provide. He will provide his presence, his strength, or whatever else he decides we most need. Maybe bravery is just looking fear in the face and telling it that it does not win because we have known the Lord here. We have known the Lord in the long, dark night. The little bird sings loud in the early morning dark, and slowly the sun peeks over the horizon. While homeschooling later that day, I asked my daughter Joyce for her definition of courage, and she says, to have faith. Maybe that is just it. Though we tremble and feel uncertain, courage means we press into a God who is certain, sure, steady. He carries us. He lifts our head, and and comfort his unfailing love and comfort become our courage and our hope. Days later, it is raining. The huge drops pelt our tin roof so hard that we can hardly hear ourselves talk. But as the rain slows, I make out a familiar noise and I laugh. The same little bird that cannot contain her song too early in the morning is now singing through the rain. I wonder where she's hiding and how she can keep singing in this storm. I wonder why she sings. The rain slows to a trickle, and the sun peeks from behind the clouds, and suddenly all I can hear is her glorious song. To have faith, I think. And I wonder, does she sing because she knows the sun is coming? And I want to be just like that little bird. Hope is a crazy thing, a courageous thing. Faith is a bold, irrational choice. But that little bird, she feels the sun coming, knows with certainty that it will come, even when she can't yet see it. We live in a world where innocent people suffer and good friends die, and stories don't have the endings we pray for. The pain and hurt are everywhere, but the joy and hope that we find in our but the joy and hope that we find in our Savior, they are everywhere too. I do not have all the answers actually. I don't have any at all. But this is what I know. God is who he says he is, and in the hurt and the pain and the suffering, God is near and he is good even when the ending ain't. Our pain doesn't minimize his goodness to us, but in fact allows us to experience it in a whole new way. God brings to mind Mary of Bethany, who chose the greater thing by putting aside her tasks to sit at his feet. A natural doer of tasks, I always resisted putting aside the daily rhythm and necessities of life to sit in his presence until he made my life such that it demanded this. I could provide my friends and family with food and shelter and medicine and love, but I could not give life. And a longing for the lives of Betty and Catherine had forced me into desperate times at his feet that I had come not only to cherish but also to long for desperately. I craved that middle of the night time when I would sit on the floor of my bathroom, just me and him. Night after night, I would sit and imagine myself, like Mary, washing his dusty feet with my tears. Even a month after Betty's death, our guest room and our couch were without occupants, but I often chose quiet time on the bathroom floor because I had felt his presence so strongly there in my struggle. It was there I had first heard him whisper in the nights after Catherine's death, come. And so I keep coming. I think more about Mary of Bethany, her ability to know what was good in the eyes of Jesus and her ability to question him at the same time. I think of a different conversation between her and Jesus, 4 days after her brother Lazarus died. She had called for Jesus days earlier when her brother fell sick, and only now was he entering their town. Lord, she said, weeping, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. She blatantly voices her disappointment. Where were you, Lord? Didn't you hear that we had called for you? You didn't come. Why didn't you come? I remember hours spent in my tiny bathroom, pressing my knees into the floor and choking on my tears. Where are you? Was my heart's cry. It's not fair. I called on you. Why didn't you come through? I imagine Jesus, who wept with Mary. I imagine the tenderness in his eyes as he looks into hers, knowing fully his great love for her and knowing fully the outcome she does not expect. I imagine the same tenderness in his eyes toward me in those long nights and the way I could feel him holding me strong in my flailing. I remember how I never felt that he was condemning me for my anger, disappointment, confusion, or tears, but rather that he was weeping with me, whispering, I know, I know. That is not my design. This is not the way I intended it. Jesus is faithful to Mary. I am the resurrection and the life, he tells her sister, Martha. Do you believe this? And there in her mess of emotions, she knows him. So have I. I have known deep in my spirit that he is who he says he is, seen in the tenderness in his eyes toward me, felt his strong arms carrying me when I could barely go on. John says Jesus loved Mary and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. So, hmm, he loved them, and so he didn't move immediately. He loved them, and so he allowed Lazarus to die. He tells his disciples that he is glad that he was not there so that they too may believe. He did this for me too. He showed me, he showed himself to be a God who uses delay to grow my belief and strengthen my relationship with him. He loves me, and so he allows me to feel pain that draws me to him. Yet, in the very same breath that I say that I trust him to purpose all things for my good and my growth and his glory, I can attest that he weeps with me. It's a bit strange, if you think about it, that Jesus weeps with Mary. Surely he isn't crying because Lazarus is dead. He knows what he is about to do, and he knows that Lazarus will be dead for only a few more minutes. He weeps for his friend. He weeps for his friend. He weeps with his friend. He sees and knows the outcome of my situation. He knows that what he is doing, even in the endings I don't expect, and still in all his compassion, he weeps with me for a world that is not as he intended, for sorrow that he did not design. Jesus wept, and the crowd said, "See how he loved him? Oh, how he loves us." I can sing because I know what is coming. I can hope because I know who is coming. In the dark of the night, I have seen his face, and I have known his promises to be true, and I know the light is coming. I want to be brave enough to hold out the hope of the gospel to a world that is hurting and alone and afraid. Not a hope rooted in the absence of pain or heartache or suffering. Not optimism that looks for the best case scenario or happy ending. A true hope that rises from the full assurance that our Savior is on his way. It's not light yet, but I know him, the one who is the light, and so in the dark I will sing. After months of putting life on hold to care for Betty, I suddenly found myself feeling a bit empty, purposeless. I would tiptoe into that pink room again and again. I knew she wasn't there. No one was in there, but her presence lingered, and my hands longed to serve her, to change her, to wash her. My eyes longed to look into hers again, and my heart longed to see her shy smile. My longing for his presence surpassed all these things, and he met me there. The more I sought him, the more and more I found him. As I knew him increasingly, I loved him more and more. Isn't this always the way? In the days before Betty died, I felt that the Lord spoke the same word over and over as I sat by her side: faithfulness. This is a fruit of the Spirit for all who believe in him. This, something he has promised me. And so I asked him to show me what it is. What does it mean, Lord, to be faithful? In the days after she died, I walked into her room 1,000 times out of sheer habit and remembered words often attributed to Aristotle. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. It struck me. Surely faithfulness is not a one time act, not a decision or a destination, not something to eventually be attained. Faithfulness is what we repeatedly do. It is a habit formed of long, hard obedience in the quiet. Faithfulness is dropping milk through a syringe for hours into a mouth that could barely swallow in the middle of the night. Faithfulness is pursuing the resistant teenager again and again and again, even though she yells and hurls ugly words. Faithfulness is chopping carrots and folding laundry and all the things that go unseen and unnoticed. Faithfulness is in a million tiny decisions and a million small surrenderings, submitting with a simple yes, Lord, that create a lifetime of obedience in the extraordinary and in the mundane. In walking through the everyday routine with my girls and the few extras God placed in our home, he taught me what faithfulness really meant. That it was in the long nights of staying awake just so Betty wouldn't be alone. That it was in the repeated prayers for her health and her peace and her comfort, even when no one was looking, even when no answers were coming. That it was in every dropper full of milk, every scripture that we read, every hymn that was hummed over her sleeping head. As it turns out, faithfulness was in the ordinary and the everyday things that do not feel glorious, but in fact lead us to his feet. Friend, faithfulness is what we repeatedly do, whether or not we see the results. Faithfulness is when we pour into hard people over and over, when we continue to serve in difficult situations, when we intentionally choose to lean into him in our troubles as well as our joys. Faithfulness is a habit formed in our hearts when no one is looking, when the day is done and the stars creep out and our call isn't easy, but we don't turn away. And ultimately, faithfulness is truly and fully found in the one who pursues us, though we thrash against him, who sits with us as we wait in the silence, who fulfills all his promises with a yes and amen in life everlasting. God's faithfulness to me in this season went above and beyond comforting me and helping me find a new song of hope, though that would have been more than enough. Quietly, he was fulfilling another part of his perfect plan for me and my family. In a season of my asking the Lord to open my eyes to his miracles and his goodness, he had opened my heart as well. Benji was a young man who like me, had originally come to Uganda on a short-term volunteer trip, but felt God tugging his heart to stay, specifically in long-term men's ministry. Now living full-time in the town of Jinja, he faithfully led Bible studies with small groups of men throughout the weeks in the hopes of discipling them toward Jesus and pouring Christ's love into their lives and families. In his free time, he lent himself as a jack of all trades to the many missionary families and young singles in the area, willing to help in any way needed, fixing plumbing and troubleshooting the internet and anything in between. He had been a friend to our family ever since he arrived in the area, but during the past several months, I had wondered if maybe he could be more. I had been observing him quietly for a while, sometimes as he led a Wednesday night Bible study for young adults that I participated in, fixed my children's bicycles in the backyard, and discipled men like Matt, whom I cared deeply for, but whom I knew would benefit more from a male teacher who could help him dig into the Word. I admired Benji's willingness to do seemingly anything to help anyone, and I greatly respected his faithfulness to continue pursuing the difficult men in ministry. Benji lived what he said he believed. I couldn't think of much that would make a man more attractive. Benji had asked me out twice early in our friendship, but I had made it clear I wasn't interested in dating. I had long ago made peace with the fact that an intimate relationship with anyone other than Jesus was probably not in the cards for me. My lifestyle was unconventional, my children were many, and I found a rhythm that worked, at least most of the time, for running my household on my own. Plus, now, life was so full and sometimes fairly chaotic. I didn't have the capacity to devote time to another person. And with all the emotional energy I was investing in my girls and in other people God had brought my way, I couldn't imagine having enough left to pour into a romantic relationship. But Benji had been a comforting presence throughout the past few years, checking on the girls and me often, helping in any way he could. He loved people well and deeply, without seeking any credit or recognition. Occasionally, I could see a tenderness in his gaze toward me or one of the girls that somehow reminded me of the gentleness of Jesus. As far as I continued to see Benji's heart for the Lord quietly on display, God seemed to be prompting me to consider him in a new light. The problem was I had so adamantly declined his previous invitations that I knew he wasn't ever going to ask again. I valued that he respected me enough not to push the issue, but as my feelings about him changed, I wasn't sure how to reopen the conversation. Hmm. I prayed for months, waffling between hope that there really could be something between us and incredulity at the thought of anyone truly being interested in a serious relationship with someone so committed to so many other things. Still, the thought persisted, and I felt the Lord's gentle nudge forward. I second guessed myself. Was this really the Lord or just some crazy whim? Could something more than friendship really develop between us? Finally, after listening to me go on and on about it for months on end, a trusted friend said, well, either it will work out or it won't, but at least you'll know. If you're still thinking about it, it is probably worth the risk. What she said wasn't some profound biblical truth or even the audible voice of God I had been secretly hoping for, but it was right. So I asked Benji to come over for coffee early one morning, and after hours of small talk in the still dark quiet before the girls awoke, I nervously shared my heart that I'd been wondering if we could get to know each other more intentionally. The words came out so jumbled that I wasn't even sure they were comprehensible, but he said he would think about it. After much prayer, we both made the decision to start seeing more of each other intentionally. My life didn't really lend itself much to dating, so we each learned the other's hearts and history during breaks from homeschool and during late night trips to the hospital to check on friends and hours of dinner preparation for a tribe of growing, hungry children. We found other ways to eke out a bit of time together. I broke things intentionally so that I would have to ask him to come to fix them, and he suddenly needed to use our washer much more than usual. In all of our interactions, no matter how small, I saw faithfulness in him. A faithfulness God had been teaching me about in this season. A faithfulness I wanted more of in a faithfulness I wanted more of in my own walk with him. Slowly, God began doing something so foreign in my heart. Where I had always been a leader, I decided to look to Benji for leadership. Where I had always wanted to make decisions my own way, God started carving in me a desire to seek out Benji's opinion before making key decisions because his wisdom was apparent. I wanted to follow this man as he followed Jesus. I wanted it more than I had wanted anything in a very long time. After months of seeing each other quietly in this way, we sat under the October stars, and the wind rustled leaves on the trees, and I felt deep peace. I'm going to ask you to marry me one day, he said, looking straight into my eyes, as if he could see through them and into my heart. I think I might say yes. I was. And that is the end of chapter 13. Chapter 14. Time to sing. My feet pound loud against hard pavement, and sweat drips from my brow. This rhythmic pounding soothes my heart, helps me to daily process all that God is doing in and around me. Sometimes as I run, I listen to worship music and forget that I am running and lifting my hands in a track all the stairs. Today I just listen as the pounding of my feet breaks the still silence of the sweltering afternoon. It had been a longer than usual dry season in Uganda, and I feel that it has been a longer than usual dry season in my life and ministry, with all the sickness and loss and sorrow for those I love. Simon has moved back in, but this time with his mother, Anna, who has put her life and career on hold to care for him. His medical care has become increasingly more complicated after many failed surgeries, and Anna and I have bonded over faulty tracheotomy and feeding tubes, and long hospital waits, and our shared desire to pour ourselves out for our children and love them well, although their current needs are vastly different from each other. They've lived with us again for many months, and now, after what seems like an endless season of hospital visits, an endless season of pleading for Simon's young, fragile life, he is facing his 11th surgery. Anna, who has become my beloved friend and confidant, as together we laugh and cry over this beautiful and hard journey of motherhood, is understandably weary. I am too. We have watched and prayed through 10 failed surgeries already. 10. 10 failed surgeries. A real weight of exhaustion has settled over both my heart and hers. Will he ever get better? The air feels hot and dry, and so does my spirit. But I feel God's love so strongly for me here, and I know with all certainty that the long dry season has drawn me to Him in a way that I could never have known apart from it. In the stillness and the quiet, in the suffering, I have fallen in love with Jesus all over again. And only then, only after I had felt His piercing gaze of love for me, had He brought a man whom I was indeed falling in love with as well. A change was happening, this thing that I thought might never happen, a man beginning to feel more like part of our family, more like someone I couldn't ever imagine life without. Slowly and certainly, God was weaving our hearts together, and I was both thrilled and terrified. The Lord was using Benji to unlock a place of deep, unbridled joy within me, one that I had not allowed myself to experience in quite a while. Interspersed between long nights of helping Anna with Simon and grieving over the loss of others we had served were moments of uninhibited laughter and closeness with this man whom I was ever so slowly falling in love with. Benji would sit and laugh with Grace and Patricia as we all snapped peas for dinner, or joke with Margaret as he taught her to ride her bike. One time I had been rolling out pizza dough as Scovia walked through the kitchen, and in a moment of silliness, I reached out and left a flower print on her cheek. This prompted her to put flour on my nose right as Benji walked into the kitchen, who, in my defense, sprinkled flour on her head. Mere minutes later, I stood doubled over in laughter in the kitchen without any more flour to finish our pizza dough, as Benji and the girls were now throwing it all over each other in the yard. I was in awe of the joy of the Lord was providing for us, even in the midst of such a difficult year. I felt hesitant, even scared to fully pursue this relationship, though it had brought so much delight to both me and my family. I had become accustomed to having Jesus as my only sufficiency, my only confidant, the only person from whom I sought any affirmation. It had been a sweet season, just me and him in it together. I think I was afraid that I might lose that closeness with the only one who had ever really known my heart. I had prayed Isaiah 61 over my children since they came home, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. Now, after the girls were tucked snugly in bed, Benji and I would sit on the couch and he would sing these words over and over: Beauty for ashes. Can you believe it? Beauty for ashes. Can you receive it? I knew deep in my spirit that this was my loving Father's song over me, too. Beauty for ashes. Can we believe it? Beauty for ashes. Can we receive it? Receive, he said. Could I? I slowed my run to a walk. I remember a verse from Song of Songs that God has recently been speaking to my heart. I feel as if it is his promise to me now. My beloved spoke and said to me, Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, come with me. See, the winter is past, the rains are over and gone. Flowers appear on the earth, the season of singing has come, the cooing of doves is heard in our land. The, the fig tree forms an early fruit, the blossoming vines spread their fragrance. Arise, come, my darling, my beautiful one, come with me. Maybe he is calling out to me, inviting me into a new, different season. And though I step with trepidation, it is safe to go with him. It is safe to run to his arms, regardless of where that might lead me or what I might encounter. I turn to run home. The horizon brings to change with evening coming. There is no dinner to be made, and homework to be done, and baths and bedtime, and all of it to do over and over again. Suddenly, the sky darkens, and as I run, I feel a drop of water hit my forehead. One, then two, then a slow trickle. I stop. It begins to pour, and I stand and catch the rain in my hands. Just like that, Uganda's long dry season is over, and I hear his voice steady and clear. Behold, I am doing a new thing. And suddenly, as the rain, and as sudden as the rain, I know his promise over us this season, that the winter is past and the dry season is over, and he will again make all things new. Flowers will appear on the earth. The season of singing has come. I tip my face upward, and rain washes over me. His mercies new, his peace constant. I weep as the rain soaks me on this stifling day. I know the water is the Lord's clear message to my heart. Refreshment is here. Rain, a season of joy. I know this deep in my heart, yet I am hesitant. His voice speaks to me clear in a way that it seldom is, and I know he is asking me to step into a season of great joy with him. I am bringing blessing and refreshment on your life, he says. It has been a long, hot, dry season. I know, child, but that season is over. Refreshment is coming. Step into it. You can enjoy the rain. You can receive what I am giving with open arms, open hands, and rejoice. After a seemingly endless season of hard, I need permission to rejoice. If I am honest, maybe somewhere along the way I have forgotten how to truly rejoice in him. Here again, he is calling me to hope. This hope that appeared impossible when the world was hard and dark. This hope that has taught me so much of his heart for me. I feel nervous, maybe even a little fear, in stepping into a season like the one I sensed he is promising. I had grown used to the dry season. I had known Jesus here in this long, hard place, and rainy season now seems foreign. But I can feel him assuring me that he will be known here too. Receive, he says again and again. Receive my blessings. Receive my provision, my love for you. Song of Songs continues. My dove in the clefts of the rock, in the hiding place on the mountainside, show me your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. Again and again in the days to come, the Lord would confirm that He was calling me out of the cleft of the rock, that He was giving me a new song to sing, a beautiful song arising from the places of dust and ashes around me. It was a song of praise. He was calling me to step into all He had for me here. It was time to come out of the hidden place and sing and embrace all that He was giving, the blessing He was pouring out. And He knew that my voice might come out crackly and tired and at first out of practice. But he would hear beauty in my song of praise in this new and glorious season. I hold my hands open to the rain and promise that with open hands I will believe in new life and I will receive joy. I finished my run and returned home to find Benji and Helene sitting on the roof of his car playing Scrabble, undeterred by the rain. My heart smiles. Months passed, months full of the same, even in this season that I felt God had declared new. I taught homeschool lessons and put away laundry and reminded children to wash their hands. Benji fixed the girls' bicycles and sneaked them candy and left love notes in the coffee maker for me to find in the morning. I was still involved with some ministry outside our home, mostly in my seats, as well as caring for our various people living with us and in need of help and restoration. Simon continued to require constant assistance, and he and his mom had settled comfortably into the guest house out back while they waited for next steps from Simon's surgeon. Anna and I had become fast friends, and we shared chores and stories in our trials and joys. On a warm May evening after dinner, Benji took the girls out for ice cream so that I could have some time to be just quiet before the Lord. Unbeknownst to me, they were making some pretty big plans. A week later, our best friends offered to keep the kids so that we could go out on a date, something we had been making time for more often as things between us grew more serious. We sat on a picnic blanket overlooking Lake Victoria and the Nile River, the water aglow with lanterns from local fishing boats. We talked and laughed about everyday life and ministry, and my heart welled with thankfulness. Benji poured out a basin of warm water and washed my feet, a kindness he had made something of a tradition early in our relationship, but that still left me speechless each time. I marveled at this man, an extension of God's tenderness toward me. He began to read from Song of Songs, Solomon, the book of Solomon, chapter 2. Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, and come with me. I choked up as he began to speak over me the very words that God had been speaking to my heart. Show me your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. He assured me of his love for me. He prayed that God would always protect our relationship from the foxes that ruin the vineyards, that might steal our joy. We each were the other's beloved, and with tears in my eyes, I nodded my head before he had even finished asking if I would be his wife. Wild shrieks of glee streamed from the nearby cluster of trees, and soon we were ambushed by shouts and hugs and kisses from our sweet girls who had been hiding in the bushes all along. Many of them began speaking all at once, rehashing the plan that they had made over ice cream earlier in the week, all of us astonished that little Grace and Patricia had both kept a secret. Tim and Shauna, faithful friends who had been our biggest support throughout all of our relationship, smiled as they looked on. After the commotion for the girls had died down a bit, Tim and Shauna took them home to prepare a dessert celebration, and Benji and I stayed behind for a few minutes to pray. We prayed again the words from Song of Songs, the book of Solomon, asking God to protect our union and strengthen us as we grew together. We prayed over each other for our daughters. We gave thanks, and as we headed home to enjoy ice cream with those we love most, a gentle rain began to fall. And that is the very nice ending for chapter 14. So I am done, chapter 14 now. On to chapter 15, presumably very soon. Thank you so much for joining me. And I had finished reading for the day, Daring to Hope, Finding God's Goodness in the Broken and the Beautiful by Katie Davis Majors. This is Debra E. Johnson. Bye.